Call to order. Sorry?
I'll do it during general council.
Oh. Now is the time and place for the board meeting of Vallecitos Water District at 5 o'clock. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance would, Chris, would you lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance?
Hand on your heart, eyes on the flag, ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. Roll call, please, electronically. One more time. One more time till you see it go present on your screen. All right. 4 of us are here. Betty Evans is absent. I need a motion to adopt the agenda for the board meeting.
Move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Public comment, there's no member of the public here, so won't be any of that. Consent calendar, all items to be approved on one motion. I have a question on one of the items. Shall I ask that now?
Sure.
Okay. Notice between the pipes, Fall Night Between the Pipes newsletter. That's already been published?
No, it's on the agenda. It's on the agenda for the board's approval, and assuming the board approves it, it will be published and sent out. If the board wants any changes, we have the opportunity to make changes to incorporate any comments we receive.
I would, after reading it at length, the part about our water being shut off by San Diego County Water Authority, by their pipe being broken, and they need to fix their pipe, I don't think that's very clear in the message we're sending out to people. Nor have we mentioned that it's not just Vallecitos, it's Rainbow, it's Valley Center, it's Carlsbad. I mean, we need to let people know it's not just us, it's not our pipe, it's not our water. And it doesn't make it very clear, I thought, in the release in between the pipes. And I think it needs to be clear that San Diego County Water Authority's pipe, they're fixing it. A number of agencies are involved, and which ones they are. And I think that makes it so it's not just us. So I'd like to see that change. Yes, sir.
I just want to, if you're trying to get consensus, I agree 100%. And I applaud Chris and his team's efforts for being as proactive as they have been in trying to get the message out. But I think one of the unintended consequences that I've heard some feedback from the community is that in our efforts to really get the message out there, none of the other agencies are doing much more than just posting a little note on their website. We've gone out with Facebook messaging, and I think we had digital or electronic signs out on San Marcos Boulevard today. Not saying that's a bad thing, I think it's all great, but because our peers are not doing the same, we're kind of taking ownership of a problem that's not our problem. And so that's one of the things you kind of have to think about when we're getting that message out. So now that we're going to continue that with pipes and other things that we might do on Facebook as we go through this shutdown, just be more mindful that we really articulate that this is a regional issue. That the one thing that a lot of folks don't understand is the leak in the pipe is not even within our service area. It's north of us in Bonsall, and so as much as we can point that out as well, so folks know they have all the specific details and there's no confusion. I think the better we do that, the better it is for us.
And the UT article that went out, I know we can't control what the press writes, but the UT article that went out did us no favors. It looked like it was our pipe. To the common person, it looks like our pipe, our problem. So at least we can set it straight in our own publication, strongly, I would say. But with that, we have a motion and we have a second, I think, yes? Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do you say aye too?
I did. Are you challenged?
No. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now is the time and place for a public hearing. This is a time and place for a hearing to consider acceptance of the public health goals report. General Manager Pruitt, will you please provide the details?
Yeah, so this is back at the meeting on August 7th, the information was provided to the board about the purposes and findings for the public health goal report. It's a required public hearing, so that's what tonight's meeting is. And back on August 7th, we set to September 4th as the required public hearing date. All the information is contained in the board packet. None of these are enforceable water quality measures. These are public health goals, very different than the consumer confidence report that establishes maximum levels. So Mr. Pedrazzi is here tonight if the board has any questions. Otherwise, the information contained in this board packet is the same as the information that was contained in the August 7th meeting.
Does any member of the Board of Directors have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we have no public. There being no other person wishing to address the board, the hearing is closed. Any member of the Board of Directors have any further questions or discussion? No. Any member of the Board of Directors wish to move acceptance of the Public Health Goals Report?
Move to approve.
Need a
Second.
second, and we're going to electronically vote. Votes are in, it's unanimous.
That's an
4
order.
yeses, with Betty Evans absent. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Union Tribune on Friday, August 30th, 2019. Thank you. Action items. Approval of purchase order for pipe assessment services at High Point subdivision. And I believe James is going to walk us
Yes.
through it.
Thank you, President Martins, members of the board. So this is the High Point community, and I have the map coming up here. So this is located over what we call in the Deer Springs area. This community that you see the mouse, that's the Emerald Heights community, and this is that, if you may recall, when Emerald Heights came in, there was that gate that was broken that they wanted us to take responsibility of. This is the gate, kind of down in here, and on the other side of that gate was this basically vacant community. So this community was built up and almost done basically in 2008. They built roughly 11,000 feet of roughly 12-inch ductile iron pipe. They had some smaller pipes too, and they have a pump station they built, which we call a hydro-pneumatic pump station, which is just a small pump station that serves that community element. But prior to it being completely done and accepted, the original builder went bankrupt, and the facility was basically laid dormant. For a while, the district tried to keep the facilities from going bad by pumping water through it, exercising, but the bank that owned it stopped paying the electricity bill on the pump station, so after a while, we didn't even have the ability to try to maintain the system. So over the years, many developers have come forward interested in developing property. The lots are laid out, the cap fees are paid on the site, and it's all graded. And basically, they're even ready to drop lumber to build the first few houses before the community went bankrupt. When they come and approach us, there's a laundry list of to-do items, including making the district whole for some of the deposit amounts that went over from the original builder, and replacing basically all the mechanical and electrical equipment in the pump station. It's garbage. So you have the pump station building, but you're getting basically a brand new pump station as far as piping, mechanical, electrical, and all the appurtenances. The valves need to be looked at, exercised. A lot of the fire hydrants were stolen during the recessionary time. People not only stole anything, but the street lights that were there, they pulled the wires out of street lights. Those aren't our issues, so other people have their own punch list items, I'm sure. One of the items in it was basically replacing all 11,000 feet of the pipe, or doing an assessment to basically prove to the district that the condition of pipe is acceptable. But the condition, if you do an assessment, it does not, you still have to do all the repairs required. It doesn't obligate the district from accepting the condition assessment. It doesn't get rid of any of the other conditions. So the first several years ago, probably 2 years ago or so, The Hilltop community or Hilltop group came and they were interested in developing, they're a local developer, developing this site. And they went through a condition assessment, first steps of it to get a proposal, and they decided not to move forward. Then we haven't heard from another developer in a while. We get a developer every couple of years interested in this site. So the engineering staff is quite adept at, pulling out, working with operations to see exactly what needs to be done. So this time, basically, the Cal West, which is the Brookfield community over there at Rancho Coronado, one of those developers, along with True Life Communities. True Life Communities is the actual owner of the site. We're interested in moving forward with the pipeline condition assessment, and they also got the laundry list of everything else they have to do to bring this bring this facilities at this site to district standards. So with that, let's see, it probably was more than 6 months ago, about 6 months ago, they gave us half the deposit to do the condition assessment. That includes our consultant time, that includes the technology, and I have a brief presentation that I'm going to pull up that shows you kind of what that is, and also our inspection time. And it is a deposit, so if it takes more time, they'll be forced to deposit more money into the deposit account. So now that we've actually received the full $135,000 in total deposits, we're ready to move forward with the $102,000 PO. I know I'm kind of saying a couple different numbers. What happened? My maps have changed. That's odd. My apologies.
It's okay.
James,
Yes.
this is the PIC presentation.
No, I'll pull it up.
Are we gonna go to that old pipe eventually?
So,
The one
I'm
Stephanie
sorry?
Court? Stephanie Court pipe that we were just looking at?
Yeah, well, that's the next item.
Okay.
So, so with that, we basically got a scope and fee from IEC, which is one of our as-needed consultants, and they're hiring Pika to basically go through, and I'll pull up the presentation right now.
And who is hiring Pika?
Our engineer, IEC, is hiring Pika because we have an existing as-needed contract or as-needed agreement with IEC, and they're hiring Pika because that's the technology company that we elected to move forward with, the district chose.
And this Hilltop group, do we know them by another name?
Hilltop disappeared. So this is now Cal West. Hilltop Group is, I think, partially with R.E.D. Young's group. So, but they ended up going away a couple years ago. So the pipeline inspection and condition analysis, basically what we're looking at is this is the sea snake inspection tool that they put into the pipe. So for larger diameter pipes like 12 inch, they actually have to cut in the pipe. So what we looked at is where are the problem spots that this could happen on this pipeline. So you got roughly 11,000 feet of pipe. Most of it is submerged and in good shape, but where do we have our breaks? We have our break at dry utility crossings and where the pipe could be dry, high points. So, and then we looked at the logical insertion points of where this pipe could go in, which is where the valves are. Since there's a good chance the valves have to be replaced anyway, we might as well dig up the valves and insert the tool at that point. So here's kind of preparing the sea snake before it goes in. Sea snake before it goes in, or pipe snake. And here's how they insert it. In this case, in our case, they're actually going to dig pits since there's no homes to disturb. This is a great opportunity for the district to actually kind of learn on the job, and we're not actually paying for this out of ratepayer money. So the developer's paying for it. Our inspectors are going to be out here because this is the exact tool that we're thinking about looking for the district's very own ductile ion pipeline assessments. We're going to go in, problem areas identified through our asset management work, and try and hit high-risk areas to see if the pipe is damaged, and hopefully get to a point where we could help predict or prevent future breaks on some of our pipes. So here's an example of it going into a fire hydrant area. So it's a smaller tool, obviously, going in, and it's able to bend around the corners to get into the pipe. The reason why you can't put the smaller tool in a larger pipe is because if you look at these areas, this is the actual, for lack of better explanation, it's almost like an MRI machine inside the pipe, and the further away is from the pipe, the less accurate. So fire hydrant runs are 6-inch. So if you go from 6-inch to a 12-inch pipe, it's sitting on the bottom, and the pipe, it's too far above to get any kind of accurate reading. So they could do a 6 to 8, maybe 6 to a 10, but that's as much as they'll recommend. The accuracy starts really going down after that. So with that, the staff is looking for board recommendation, board approval of the purchase order for Infrastructure Engineering Corp. in the amount of $102,685. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mr. Sinella?
So I understand that if whatever is found during this assessment, the developer is going to have to pay to replace it, fix it, whatever. But what happens 10 years after the project's developed? Is there going to be any legal language or anything that's going to hold them accountable for, say the assessment was wrong? I mean, are we on the hook? Because that's what happens, right? These developments go in 20 years down the road, they're long gone, and the pipe breaks, and then we're on the hook for it. So is there any contingencies in place for us, given that we're kind of allowing them to do a little bit of a kind of a special thing versus just replacing all the other, just replacing the 11,000 feet of pipe?
Not at this time. So what this is a first step. So they have a list of conditions from the district, and one of those items is replace all 11,000 feet of pipe. And they're saying, can we do this instead? And we said, you can, but it doesn't mean we're going to accept the results. But they're trying to see what, basically they're hoping this analysis shows the pipe's in great shape and they only have a couple spot repairs, and they want to use that to say, okay, look, this is in good shape. At that point, the district, working through engineering and working through the general manager, and then at the end of the day, working through the board, we come back and say, we feel that based on the analysis, the pipe's in good shape. However, we would still want, extended warranty or something to that effect. So nothing like that has been put on the table or is off the table.
A more direct, I'll say a direct answer to your question. Once we accept it and any warranty period is passed, it's ours. Just like any development, even if it got built without these long delays, it's ours. Now, James kind of alluded to it at the end. We may request an extended warranty period. That's something we could work with our attorneys and say, instead of a traditional 1-year warranty period, maybe we get multi-year warranty period.
Okay.
And we've already broached that subject with the developer, and they were hoping just for that and not to do this $100,000, $135,000 study.
This, it's ductile iron, and we've had really poor results with ductile iron. What they're doing isn't going to tell us if we have breaks in the outside wrapping that are going to allow it to deteriorate quickly. It doesn't tell us that at all.
Director Martin, it actually does. So one thing great, and the reason why we picked the Pico tool is the Pico tool is the only one that gives you metal density and thickness. So this is not just a camera inside. So there's a lot of other tools that give you a camera view inside. But what the Pico tool does that's unique from, I think there's one other tool that's used in Europe that we can't, we can't afford to bring it over here for this little job. Is it gives you basically pipe material and density. So it basically, as it bounces off the pipe wall, if there's a scab, like the board has seen kind of some of the broken pipes, how it kind of has a hole and there's a density difference in that metal, it'll actually show. And part of this job is then to go in, pothole that area and verify to get a level of confidence based on the results. So we're not just getting the results from Pika and saying, they say it's good, it's good. We're getting the results from Pika and then going in and digging up the piping spots and verifying it. So when the areas that we pick are those primary, so we've had a lot of problems with this pipe material in the past. Majority, not all, but majority of those problems have been human error. Dry utility contractors digging over the top of the pipe, ripping the protected coating, actually damaging the pipe itself. and the pipe just didn't break instantly. It took a while for that pipe to break. It's out of the warranty period. Sometimes it takes 10 years plus. So there's only 38 homes in this area, so there's not a lot of dry utility crossings. So we are doing all the areas where the pipe could be dry. Where the pipe's dry, there could be corrosion on the inside. And we're doing all the areas that are dead ends and all the areas where we have actually utility crossings. That doesn't mean we may not miss something, we understand that, but we're doing all the most likely culprits.
So, how long ago were these pipes installed?
2008,
So
11 years.
11 years old.
Hasn't broken yet.
What were the fees? Well, it hasn't been used. What were the fees back then compared to what they are today?
The capital facility fees?
Yeah.
I don't recall those numbers, so.
Much less.
But they were less.
And what's the benefit to the water district, to the ratepayers, of letting them do this rather than just saying, no, put in new pipes?
There could be made that argument that we could just say no, and we still have that option to say no at the end of this if that's the choosing of both staff and board.
Okay. Any other questions? So you're asking us to spend?
No, actually, this is
Let me take that. So we're asking the board to approve the expenditure of funds to enter into an agreement. It exceeds the general manager's authority. We're getting the money from a contractor, but we're entering into a contract. So, or from the developer, we're getting money, but we're entering into the contract. So we need the authority from the board to spend the money, even though it's not our money.
Are we collecting the money from the developer
We already have
prior to?
We already have it.
we are.
You already have it.
We've collected 100% of the money that we need. And as James mentioned, if the project is delayed and there's cost overruns, the developer has to give us more money.
Okay, and this will come back to us after
Assessment.
your
Yeah,
assessment?
not only that, we're hoping to actually organize some opportunity to get people out there during the assessment to actually see it, because this is one of the front-running technologies that many water districts are using to do pipeline assessments of metallic pipes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, one of the groups will get out there is Chris's team. We'll take videos, we'll paint a picture, a story about what they did out there.
Director Ellenthorpe?
I'd move staff's recommendation.
Got a motion
And a second,
and a second?
discussion.
Discussion?
Could you identify, because I think physically, I'd like to go out and see what's going on. I don't know if anybody else on the board would like that, but the videos are great, they always have been great, but
Yeah, James and I actually talked about that this morning at our managers meeting, about setting up some time and inviting the board out after we've open a section and we're ready to launch that snake, and maybe see how it operates.
yeah, Hal wants to get right in the ditch.
Yeah, I want to be there. Okay, we need to vote on this? We use electronic voting apparatus?
Are we doing it electronically? Oh,
Sure.
look at that.
Yeah, you're used to it. Mr. Snell, are you going to vote?
I'm thinking.
Okay, they've all voted. Now, how did they
Weighing
vote?
your options, sir.
Oh, passes 4 yes with 1 absent.
Yep.
Thank you very much for that one. James, we're going to go to 3.2, which looks at view 2, approval of payment for emergency repair, Stephanie Court and San Alejo Road.
Yes, I think again, President Martin, members of the board may recall that this is the, along San Leo Road pipeline that broke. Now, we thought initially it was a 16-inch pipe, and I kind of put this figure up here. I don't get the figure up here. So I kind of put this figure up here to kind of illustrate kind of the complexity of the area. So we have a lot of facilities in San Leo. Ed will probably echo this opinion. It's one of the more difficult water systems as far as from an operation side. There's several pump stations that rely on each other, which means there's several pipes. So going up San Leo Road, we have a lot of pipelines in the ground, and it's a slope. So when a pipe breaks on a slope road, that's mainly put in fill, water surfaces not necessarily where the pipe is leaking. So when we got into this road, also just kind of give you an idea, This is the San Luis Elementary School. The middle school is right below here. This happened during the week, obviously during school hours. But one of the things that we were concerned about is the traffic time when it comes to school pickup time. So it was basically identified with a lot of debating, walking around and utility locations and everything else we can do, that actually we were fairly lucky. Initially we thought it was off the 16-inch line. It was actually off the 8-inch line, which feeds this basically townhome condo community on Hope Street. Thank you. So, because if it fed the larger 16-inch line, depending on where it was, there's a potential we could put hundreds of homes out of service, plus the 80-something condos right there on Hope Street. But we were fairly lucky that it was on the 8-inch line. But due to the complexity of the site, basically our ops crews were able to kind of isolate, shut the valves off, and start locating where the pipe break may be to verify that it was on the 8-inch, but at the time we didn't know. Cass Arietta was called in under emergency, and we've used Cass Arietta before because of not only their past performance, but their ability to mobilize, to come in and basically do the repairs. Now, one of the things that prompted us to call Cass Arietta, besides the complexity of the area, was the timeliness of the area. We need to work as a team to not only get all the traffic control, because we're essentially shutting down San Leandro Road, going, what is that, northbound or northeastbound?
East and west.
And so we needed somebody to get to work while our crews could do all the traffic control, set up the blockades. And when we looked at the area damage, I tried to highlight it here, and it doesn't show well in the picture, but this is basically almost, if you know where schoolhouses kind of down here, it's basically almost a third of the road was uplifted in some form, and we didn't know if it was undermined, because there's sections where, as we were digging, you have the asphalt on top, but as soon as you punch through the asphalt, your equipment just goes right down, because all the dirt underneath was completely undermined, which is a dangerous situation. If you had a car drive over it, they could fall on the wheel, you could damage, somebody could get hurt. So we had some concerns there. So the decision was made to bring in Cass Arietta so we kind of work on this the most efficient way possible, with our crews trying to locate, setting up traffic control, getting the safety done, working with the city to ensure that we keep cars out of the way, and trying to find a circulation route, because we're going to be working well past school pickup time, and also people coming home into this community with no water. And then Cass Arietta could concentrate on just getting the pipe fixed, and which they did. And people, I think, were back on water that night, maybe 8 o'clock or so.
Yeah, it was 8 o'clock, largely due to the fact that we got Cass out there. As James mentioned, when our staff rolled up on site and when I got there, it looked like we had 3 main breaks on the 16. There were 3 eruptions in the asphalt, and that was one of the things that triggered us calling them out. We only have 2 backhoe crews, so no way we could do 3 repairs at once. By the time Cass had mobilized and got out there, we had been able to determine that, or at least we hoped, that it was only on the 8-inch. We started digging there. Cass took over that dig and repair while we repaired the road in the other 2 spots. So by the time Cass completed the repair, we were flushing, taking our bacteriological samples. We'd finished the road repair and we were able to get that road back in service with temporary patches. So it actually worked out very well working as a team with Cass on this.
Does Cass do all types of heavy equipment? There was a company, Cass, that did all the grading out there for San Alejo back in the day. Is that the same Cass?
Yeah, they have all kinds of equipment, and they typically will bring out an excavator. We don't have an excavator, so the jobs that we had, like on Twin Oaks and San Marcos Boulevard, those required an excavator. There's
So
one
it's
other.
probably the same company, Cass?
Yes, yeah.
Right?
And under the district's policies, under emergency provisions, the general manager has the authority to move forward with these, but then we have to bring it back for the board for final approval. And that's what we're here today for. And you can see from within the staff report, which is on page 72, kind of the financial impact. So you had roughly $161,000 of repair work from Cass. We had Christian Wheeler's our as-needed geotech. We have to take the soil samples, compaction testing, and provide them to the city to ensure that we put the road back with a proper subgrade and that's safe. Obviously, we furnished some materials during the work, repair traffic control signs, whatever we needed to do, temporary asphalt including, and then the staff time, which most of the staff time was our operations crew's initial work that first day, day and a half, and then once CAS was done, our operations staff took over to schedule the final paving, working with CAS and their paver, and also making sure that the road signs and to meet all the city needs. So with that, the total came out to $209,375.70. And today we're asking for approval of payment to CAS area in an amount of $160,985.15. The remaining balance comes out of our funding for water operations, our reserves.
Can I ask you a question? The line that you're showing us there with the big hole in it, that's only 22 years old.
Yeah.
What made it fail?
There was a dry utility package right on top of it.
What's that?
A dry utility package, so SDG&E, cable, yeah, all of that was sitting, not just above it, was sitting on our main.
Don't we, and maybe I'm wrong about this, don't we have inspectors that go out there? And I've heard some of the inspectors sit there all day long with people doing work, like on the Creekside development. It was a big complaint because an inspector sat there all day long drinking coffee. Well, this is the reason why they should be out there drinking coffee. What happened?
So what happens on a typical job is the wet utilities, your water, sewer, storm drains go in first.
Got it.
They go in first, they're done, they're in, everything's being rough graded, pads aren't in yet, roads are being set, curb and gutters being set, and then we're done. The pipeline's done. There's not a single home on site typically. Months and months and months later, the dry utility package gets put in. So back in the boom, there was no notifications or procedures or processes for that. So they would just be put in later. And if I don't know if you guys have probably seen them work on the road. They use a big ditch wheel. Looks like a big saw that they sit behind. They put that thing down and they just go. And there's trenches are pretty shallow, but sometimes they go a little deep and they end up hitting the pipe. Well, they're supposed to notify the responsible agency, whether it's the city or us, if they hit a storm drain or if they hit a water pipe. The most shallow wet utility is the water pipe. Sewers are deeper, storm drains are typically deeper. So since when they hit it, obviously they're not notifying us. That's actually the proper protocol. It's in their specs and provisions to do so. But they hit it, no water came up, they leave, and the pipe, there's good and bad things about the pipe. One of the good things about ductile iron is it's strong, so it didn't break when they hit it. We're using PVC now. PVC, if you hit it like that, it's going to break and water's going to come out of the hole. Good news about that is the responsible party is going to get wet. They're right there. So.
Director Lethorpe?
Yeah, you mentioned it was SDG&E was utility.
They're one of the dry utilities typically that we find has crossed over our pipe.
That was one of the ones that was in this particular case?
Yeah, I believe there was.
Was it direct buried line, or was it?
No, there was conduits. There was quite a big package of conduit.
Was it concrete encased conduit?
That one was not. So it may not have been SDG&E, but we found a lot of their gas lines especially going over the top. And typically when we find a failure on the very top of the main, what we're thinking has happened is the dry utility contractor, well, we don't want to hit their main, so they're probing. Then they've taken that steel probe and they're punching right through the bag and hitting the top of the main, and that starts the corrosion process.
Have we ever had a conversation with SDG&E or anyone else on this issue?
Director FR, yeah, we've met with SCG&E. They're pretty standard responses. It's the contractor's fault. It's beyond the statute of limitations. It's out of warranty. It's beyond 10 years. It's, we can't do anything about it. Working with the reps, though, when we replace pipe, they come out and they relocate their conduits. SCG&E does not Packbell. We can't get anybody else to work with us. They'll come in at no cost. So typically, if we have to replace a pipe and SCG&E has to move their pipe, they charge us for it. But but we're clearly showing them that they're in violation because their pipes, their conduits are sitting directly on top of our pipe. So they come back out and they move it, they lift it, they do whatever they need to do, and they don't charge us. But as far as from their point of view, you have to go after the original developer or the original contractor, because they didn't inspect their facilities going in.
So these are typically like 12 kV?
No, they're all different. So this is probably a larger package that went to that 80 something condo unit. Most of them are just, when you drive down a neighborhood street, you see those little boxes for your cable and your electricity. And because it goes down one side of the road and crosses, it's just those little crossings. So they're just 240 and maybe 480 if they have it there, but most of it's just neighborhoods.
It's transformed
Yep.
voltage. Thank you.
So what's the answer? I mean, what's the answer to stop this from happening consistently?
So now we've put in a process where we're trying to go out there and observe the dry utilities going in. We've also the city has gone to not public roads, so we have a full easement on the road that goes curb to curb. So now, since we have the easement that goes curb to curb, we still allow other utilities in that easement, but we have the right to look at their drawings and move them. So we're getting a lot of complaints from developers about this because it makes it difficult for SCG&E. SCG&E doesn't want to sign our encroachment agreements, but we still make them. And we've been battling SCG&E for years over it. The other, besides those specification changes that we've made, the other change is going to PVC. If you hit PVC the way they're hitting these ductile iron lines, PVC it's not nearly as strong in that respect. It doesn't corrode, which is great, but if you hit PVC with a saw under pressure, it's going to explode and you're going to get wet. And then there's no denying whose fault it is.
Well, and that's just if you're hitting it, but let's say you're laying your dry utilities on top of our pipe and you're not compacting correctly.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's going to break our pipe. So where are our inspectors?
So our inspectors are trying to get out there, but usually we don't get the opportunity because there's no notification. SCG&E doesn't notify us. They have their own inspectors that are supposed to be doing that. Obviously, that's not happening. Cox, Pac-Bell, they usually don't even have inspectors out
We
there.
can't require them to notify us?
So that's what I'm saying is when we get the full easement, we're requiring it, and then we're trying to work with the developers. But of course, the developers don't want to pay for our inspectors to go out there because sometimes those dry utility packages don't go in for 6 months, usually 2 to 3 months, but 4, 5, 6 months until after our job is completely done and gone. So it's, we're out there a lot more than we are now. But in this case, if you were to put a PVC, SCG line right on top of the PVC, it's not going to corrode the PVC. And as long as they didn't undermine the PVC, it should not make a difference on the pipe because it's not going to settle. They're not digging below our pipe. Now, if they were going underneath our pipe or doing something like that, there's a crossing, we're out there for those.
So early in High Point, then, that's one thing they're going to catch with the snake, is if that's already happened.
That's the intent.
I would add, this is primarily a legacy issue. We're dealing with the problems that have occurred in the past. We're not putting much or any new ductile iron pipe in the ground. Most of the dry utilities for most of the existing ductile iron pipe have been run, but the problems that exist, we just haven't found out where they're at yet. So I don't think there's much we can do going forward other than the pipeline condition assessment.
Any other questions? No? I move to approve the payment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Electronically. Hey, we got the system. Use it. Again, 4-0, 1 absent, Betty Evans.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item. Item 3.3, I'm not even going to say what it is. I'm going to let General Manager Brewer bring it up.
All right, back at the June 25th Public Awareness, Personnel and Policy Committee, there was an item on the agenda to discuss whether the district should consider eliminating the use of single-use plastics. So Basically, single-use plastics are just what they sound like. It's things that are used once and thrown away before they're either reused, recycled, or just completely discarded. So things like plastic bags, straws, utensils, those types of things. Pens. The focus of the conversation at the PAP committee meeting had to do with, mostly with beverage containers and some utensils. So it's primarily the plastic water bottles. That was the focus at the PAP committee. The committee recommended that this item be brought before the full board to see if a policy should be considered. So we're not asking the board to adopt a policy tonight. We're asking the board to say, do you want us to go back and develop a policy that would affect or address the use of single-use plastics? So we do use single-use plastics, a fair amount of them. I don't have a dollar amount or a tonnage, but we do use plastic utensils and drinking bottles and plastic cups and things like that. We use the plastic water bottles for district events, and we also provide it to customers if they lose service. So if we have a water main break and we have to shut off and isolate a section of a community, we'll deliver water out there. So there is a need to have a portable source of water, I'll say. I guess societally, one of the biggest concerns about single-use plastics is the impact on the environment. So that's kind of the bigger issue. And there are alternatives to single-use plastic. They're becoming more and more prevalent. You'll find things like compostable knives and forks, so you don't have to use plastics. There are cardboard cartons of water, so you don't have to use plastic. And they're not widespread, but they are out there. So we did a little bit of analysis. So one of the biggest concerns, understanding the environmental issues, is the cost. What would it mean to us if we adopted a policy restricting the use of single-use plastics? Staff did not perform a comprehensive analysis, but we did look at the cost of the single biggest use that we have of single-use plastics, which is on water bottles. So for the last full year that we had data available, we spent approximately $1,350 on bottled water. We did an analysis to determine of the alternative choices available, what would the cost of those be, and those were those little boxed waters. So we looked for the same volume of water and for the same sizes. The alternative would cost almost $15,000 for the same amount of water. So that's almost 1,000% increase. It's about a 990% increase in the cost. So you could address some of the environmental concerns, but at a great cost to the district. So that's just kind of a high-level analysis of what we did to determine whether there were products available and what the cost of those products would be. So from a fiscal impact perspective for the consideration of a policy, there's no cost. I mean, there's some staffed cost to go develop a policy, and we would bring it back in front of the board to see if the board is interested in adopting some kind of a policy. And we, at that time, if we were directed to bring back a policy, we would do a greater cost analysis to determine, depending on what policies developed, what the cost impacts would be. So at this point in time, you're not getting a recommendation from staff. I'm just looking to the board for direction as to whether you want staff to pursue a comprehensive policy for board consideration regarding the use of single-use plastics.
Director Hernandez.
The question between the differential, is that for all of our plastic usage, the 15,000? Or is that just water bottles?
That was just for the water bottles, and when we looked at the one full year of analysis, the water bottles alone was about $1,350. A similar amount in quantity and sizes and packaging sizes was about $14,700 with these other alternatives that we found.
I would like to see a policy, but obviously, if we have to deliver water to community because we're shutting it down, then yeah, obviously we're not going to take a paper cup. But when we talked about it originally, it was primarily as a statement for the district office here. I can't believe we spent $1,300 on bottled water for the office. No. And the other alternatives to the plastic for use in the district office is, and I know we have at the drinking fountain, we have the filled bottles, and you notice that I've been fortunate to have my paper cup here at every board meeting. So I think there are ways to make the statement and not expend $15,000. And I think that would be borne out if we had a policy looked at and brought back to us.
If I can jump in, and thank you for reminding me, we're in the process of installing those water bottle filling stations within the district facilities here. So I think there's one over in Building B, there's 3 in this facility, and 1 at Meadowlark. So that'll make it easier for the employees and the public that comes to visit to refill a reusable bottle like those. They're very common nowadays.
But that water is in plastic water bottles.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, they come there, bring the big 5-gallon jug, which is plastic.
No.
So this would be connected to our domestic water supply here and would go through a machine that would cool it. I don't know if there's filtration capabilities to it, but it would also have a higher neck so you can install those bigger reusable bottles in front of it. It's not sparklets, we're not talking about something like that.
How much are those machines?
Well, we got a grant for those. So there's a grant money available, so we got the grant. It costs us some money to install them, but the grant money paid for the machines themselves.
And to maintain them?
That'll be our responsibility, our facilities.
Director Lothrop?
Okay, kind of a related issue or question is, how is trash handled here at the administrative site? Are recyclables separated out and disposed of that way?
They are. We source separate things, so we have trash and we have recycling bins. In some areas, we have combined recycling. In some areas, we have, this is for cans, this is for plastics. It depends. In people's office, you get a recycling bin. If you go to the lunchroom and some of the coffee bars, you'll have more source-separated recycling. And then those are put out for EDCO to come pick up and whatever they do with them. And there's a lot of controversy in the industry about what actually happens with the recyclable materials. A lot of foreign countries that have been receiving it they're starting to say we don't want it anymore.
There's 1,000 square mile garbage patch floating out in the Pacific Ocean, I guess. Okay, thanks.
We need a motion to go forward?
Well, I guess, yeah, I'm looking for direction. Absent direction, we're not going to be developing a policy. The policy could be very broad, and it can talk about all sorts of things, or it could just say, at district facilities and events, we will endeavor to do these things.
And how would the policy be developed? Through the staff or at the policy committee or how?
A combination of those two things. Staff would be doing most of the heavy lifting, but the policy committee could provide input if that's what if the board wants to delegate that to the policy committee.
I would entertain a motion to recommend to the district to put together a policy with which would be brought back to the board for ultimate determination.
I will second that, but I'd like to have the monetary expense put with it.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to know what it's going to cost us to do this. I mean, I'm for not using straws, because we don't have any. But the water that we deliver to people, we have to, it only comes in plastic. When people come here we do the 2 fairs a year, and we give out water bottles there.
Yeah, so there are options to those little cartons like.
But
remember
they're
the old
expensive, we don't
milk
want to give them
cartons?
away.
Right.
What's their cost in comparison?
Well, it's between 5 and 10 times what a plastic water bottle costs for the same quantity.
I don't know, we should be giving away water, period, much less. So, yeah, I don't have a problem. It comes back to committee and then comes back to the board.
I guess I'm going to ask Director Hernandez for some clarity. Are we talking a broad policy or specifically about water bottles? Disposable plastic?
My scope would be the district office and whatever plastics we are using at the district office. Water bottles, cups, forks, plates, that sort of thing. Beyond that, beyond that, I understand we're gonna have to deal water with community if they need water, or potentially our event. But I think we could more clearly ferret that out after we got some direction and information from staff at the policy committee.
Director Sinella?
Are we doing the water refill stations at Meadowlark as well, or just here?
Yeah,
Oh, so the-
One at Meadowlark, one in Building B, which is next door, and 3 in this building, so 5 total.
And so I'm not on this committee. Jim, you are?
Yeah,
And who-
Hal Martin and I.
Oh, wow, okay.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Cynic is on the committee.
So I wasn't privy to any of the conversation, but it sounds like, if I'm understanding what I'm hearing here from Director Hernandez, that kind of the spirit of what he's trying to accomplish is, in lieu of us now having these refilling stations that are being installed, which a lot of companies are doing that as well, we could have a district policy that just says the district's not going to purchase single-use water bottles and maybe cups, plastic cups, at the district office and Meadowlark, for regular use. There could be an exception in there for emergency use, but, and I think that would be, and then if you know, obviously, if employees bring in their own plastic bottles, then so be it, but it's not gonna be provided by the district. And then I think I don't know what you guys do with your coffee machines, but a few years ago, a lot of the companies took out reusable coffee cups, and they either provided everybody with a ceramic cup that they could reuse, or a glass cup, or you could bring your own. So I don't know if you guys do that. I don't know if did you talk about coffee?
I think at the district, I think we could talk about the whole issue.
Okay.
And then at the committee, we'll narrow it down, and then we bring it here, we can
Yeah, I don't-
modify it at the very end.
I think if the policy is as simple as that the district's just not gonna provide single-use plastic bottles as part of normal, regular business use, then we might actually save money. It might lower costs, because now we're not gonna provide water. If somebody wants water, they're gonna have to go to the drinking fountain or to the new stations, right?
Well, let me ask a question of Ed, for guys that are working out in the field, do they carry their own little water bottles around, or do they use plastic?
There's a water jug on the utility trucks that's filled with ice water before they leave.
And that's what they get?
And that's what they use. Some of them might use the red Solo cups, but they're definitely not using plastic water bottles. In fact, I don't know of anybody, the district doesn't normally supply plastic water bottles to staff. That's just for
Okay.
events and emergencies.
In the spirit of what Director Sinella said, for that example, maybe we wouldn't provide red Solo cups from the field, maybe it'd be more of a compostable or paper cup instead of a disposable plastic for use in the field. Those are things that could be considered in the policy.
I mean, if it's something as simple as that, I think environmentally, it's a good thing to do. And if we're able to do it with either no cost at all or very minimal cost, I'd be open-minded to it, just for the district facilities here at Meadowlark.
Yeah.
And again, it's more about just, we're not gonna buy plastic bottles anymore for regular use. But I think the policy should have an exception in there at the general manager's discretion, or however you wanna put it, in an emergency, it's different.
Okay, is that enough direction?
That's good enough direction for me.
Excellent. All right. Item number 3.4.
So at the same PAP committee meeting, there was an item to discuss whether overnight hotel stays would be compensated for district-sponsored events within San Diego County. So right now, it's the district's practice that we do not compensate, and this is for directors and for staff. The practice has been that we do not compensate for overnight hotel stays in the county, but we haven't found anything in the policy that specifically prohibits it. So the question that's out there is, do we need to clarify this issue? And similar to the last item, the recommendation from the committee when they heard this item was, let's present this to the full board and see if the board wants to adopt or develop some kind of a policy. There is an employee handbook that talks about travel with meetings, seminars, and conference attendance. Again, it doesn't specifically address overnight stays. We have reviewed, staff has reviewed some other water districts and what their policies are. Most of them don't allow for overnight stays within San Diego County, but that's not, I wouldn't say that's all of them. A lot of them have specific inclusions, as does ours, that says, be reasonable. What would you do if it was your money? Would you stay overnight if you had a conference in Del Mar, would you stay overnight? if you were paying the bills. So if the board wants to consider the development of a policy, some things you may want to think about are, should geographical limits be the limitation, or should it be a mileage radius? So, and the example I give in the staff report is, you can get to southern Orange County quicker than you can get to downtown San Diego, but per our practices, it would be okay to get compensated to stay in Orange County, but not in San Diego, city of San Diego. Should events that go way into the evening or start very early be a consideration for whether overnight lodging is allowed, or compensation for that is reimbursable? If a conference in San Diego County is multi-day, should there be a policy that allows at least one or more nights within the limits of it? And is cost a factor, for example, for reimbursement for mileage? If a director were to stay overnight, they would forego the mileage reimbursement they would otherwise get. So can that director or staff member receive a credit, maybe in the amount that they would otherwise get for travel reimbursement, mileage reimbursement, towards a hotel night without the district picking up the whole cost? And those are just examples of things that the board may want to consider. If we were to do a policy for travel, I think it should be more comprehensive than just looking at overnight stays in San Diego County. We don't have limits on meal reimbursement, for example. Again, it falls to the reasonable. So do we want to establish limits on those? And I guess I'm looking to the board to say, do we want to develop any kind of a policy? And if so, how broad do we want to cast the net? And specifically what's agendized is the overnight hotel stays within San Diego County. So with that, similar to the last one, there's no recommendation from staff, just looking for direction.
Director Hernandez.
I think we do need to identify something specific. Actually, there's only 3 conferences that, during the year, that are appropriate. We got 2 in San Diego and then 1 in Irvine, and the one in Irvine, we already get the overnight for. So really, there's only the 2. But I think the more comprehensive, that we're bringing up some of these other points, and the meals, how much is reasonable to expend. I think if we clarified that with staff, starting the information, bringing it to the policy committee for more direction, and then ultimately to the board for final decision, I think that would be the prudent thing to do, personally.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see a more comprehensive policy. It's really difficult, for example, to attend the Aqua Conference if it's in San Diego, because you can't really attend all the events with dealing with traffic, getting back and forth. And so I think it's worthwhile for that event.
Director Sinella?
A couple things, and I don't go to a lot of conferences, so I actually, when I saw this on the agenda, I kind of didn't really give it much thought, because it's not that, it doesn't really impact me. But my initial thought was that, that we probably just leave it as it is as far as the San Diego hotel overnight stays. But then you said something, Glenn, that you said, what would you do if it was your own money, or if it was under some other circumstances and the district wasn't paying for it? And it kind of got me thinking that I live here in San Marcos, but I often have to work in San Diego and attend things down there for work. And just a week and a half ago, I spent a week in San Diego in a hotel because I knew it was going to be 12-hour days, and didn't want to add the commute on top of that and everything else. And I do it pretty frequently for work, actually. So then it got me kind of thinking. So I'm open to looking at it from a comprehensive approach. Another thing I want to say as part of that comprehensive approach, though, is I've worked at places before as government contracting places where they've treated their expenses like through the GSA per diem guidelines. That if you're traveling to this location, you get this much money for the hotel, this much money for your meals, and you just get it. If you don't use it, you still get it. If you go over it, then you just get the lower amount. So I don't know if there's any legal reasons why that would preclude us from doing that, but that's something we might want to look at as well. Jim, I look to you, I don't know if as a water district, I know the federal government uses that pretty regularly, but I don't know if that water districts are not allowed to do that, but that's an option we can look at as well.
My thoughts are, well, a couple different thoughts, actually. San Diego County is not really a good parameter, because if they're having a conference out in Borrego Springs, I think we'd all stay there, and that's in San Diego County. I do think there are times when you have early morning, and then in the evening, as we found out most currently, closed session meeting, where you find out things by attending the evening meetings or by the social hour. You find out many things that you never would have found out during the normal course of business. So I think there are times that you should get reimbursed for staying there. But, I don't know, a formal policy rather than, and case-by-case basis. And I don't know whether I know some districts, for instance, if you say you're going to go to a conference and you don't go to it, some districts, and it's a little off the track, but I'll get back to it, some districts will have you either do the Maya Cooper at the meeting, or you pay for it out of your own pocket. And I'm thinking maybe prior to the meeting, you bring up at the meeting that, hey, we're doing this and this, but this day and this night, so I'd like to stay a night. I can understand that, rather than every night, which seems expensive. But I think if you have something special you're doing, and you're going to be attending something in the name of Vallecitos, and then having to get back there at 7 o'clock the next morning, I think if you wanted to take a day, typically we do that now without anything. We don't need to get crazy. It's the same thing with food. I don't know anybody that abuses, truthfully, the food situation. I try to eat Subway whenever I can, but sometimes, like you're out to Renaissance in Palm Springs, you got to eat at their restaurant, and a cheeseburger there is $26. So there's no Mickey D's near it. So, and I think most people do that and are conscious of that. And if you get invited out by a few other people, a few other board members, to a dinner, I don't typically go because I know they're going to go out for a nice dinner. It's going to be $35 or $40. And I don't want to put that down as an expense. So I don't normally do those things, but I don't know. Maybe if you just ask for beforehand rather than go through a formal policy. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. I don't have a problem with it, but I think staying a whole week down in San Diego is ridiculous. I understand the federal government and its agencies, but for our water district, hard to explain to people that go do that drive every single day of their life, 5 days a week. Hey, yeah, well, we got to stay down there for all 4 days, versus, well, we have some meetings on one day and next morning or early. And so I think we just go case by case. I don't know. That's my thought. What's everybody else's?
Yeah, and just to clarify, the GSA thing was less about yes or no on the overnight stay, but just a possible way to handle food expenses, because it would mean that you don't have to keep receipts. There's a lot of, you just basically, okay, it's 4 nights, and Ann and Diane can fill that out, put the number in there, look on the website real fast if it's $60 a day or whatever it is, and then it's done with it. So it's a lot more efficient as well.
I move we ask for a formal policy, having staff start it, take it to the policy committee, and bring it back to the board for final approval.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes.
So is that pretty clear? It's not clear to me, but there's a lot of stuff.
That's going to come back.
Yeah, it's going to come back.
It's going to come back.
We'll get it all.
Like everything, it's a
It'll come
process.
Why don't you guys hash it out in your committee and then?
Because we want the boards in.
We want the board's approval because
Yeah. We don't wanna be-
our
we're not
committee
dictators.
doesn't necessarily see things the same way all the time.
Exactly.
Hard to believe, I know.
I got it, yeah.
So it's just
Diamond
like,
Jim over
bring
here
it to the board, there's
spins
5
it.
people.
Yeah, but 5 people to weigh
That's
in on
right,
these.
someone's got to make a decision then. All right. Resolution concurring nomination of Aqua President and Vice President. I move that we concur with the nomination of the Aqua President and Vice President.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
Well, hold on.
What?
They're already in position.
They're both for vice president.
Yeah, both people that are looking for your endorsement are both running for vice president.
Well, then let them fight it out.
I've got I'd make a separate motion.
Sure.
Is to not act on these two, not give either an endorsement, and just wait till the Aqua slate comes out in late September.
Yeah, so-
I second the substitute motion.
Okay. Yeah, the slate will come out on September 27th from the nominating committee, and then the election will be at the fall conference on December 4th.
All in favor?
No action.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Unanimous. Okay, on to the general manager's report.
Yeah, just two real quick items. One is just an update on Pipeline 4 shutdown. It's still scheduled to begin September 9th and go through September 18th. So it's a 10-day, 10-day shutdown. As the board may recall, we're doing everything we can to prepare. We're doing messaging. We have 3 message boards out there, one on Mission, one on San Marcos Boulevard, and the other on San Alejo. So we're trying to get out to as much people as we can. We're filling the reservoirs. And I think at the last meeting or the meeting before, you may recall that in order to make sure we get as much water off the first aqueduct that we can, we actually replaced a valve on our valve. It's called the Valve 2 connection. And the old one that we took out is sitting on the side of the room over there. So if you haven't looked at it, maybe after the meeting, you may want to stop by and take a look at it. It's severely tuberculated. It means just basically corrosion inside the pipe.
Tuberculated.
It's,
I like that word.
yeah, it's been in the ground for 60-plus years,
Oh.
and that's what happens to a valve in a pipe when it's sitting in the ground for
Imagine what it'll
60-something
look like.
years. And obviously, when you look at that valve, you'll realize that there's no way you could have gotten a positive shutdown on it. And this situation was worse. We couldn't get it fully opened to allow as much water as possible. So in order to,
Did Ed's people do the installation of this?
that's, people did those, yeah.
Oh, nice.
They excavated, dug down, cut it out, put the new piece in.
Who needs cast?
We have and next meeting on September 18th, you're going to see a video that kind of
Oh, good.
summarizes what we
Oh.
did. So we couldn't get it ready in time for this meeting,
I
but
hope
it will
there's
be at the
music.
next one.
News at 11. Be
And,
breath.
the only other item I wanted to mention was, remember, we're in the process of a district-wide solar project.
Yes.
We were out looking for proposals for interested parties. The deadline for that was August 30th, and we did receive some proposals. We'll be analyzing those, reviewing those, and taking those to the engineering committee. I thought it was going to be September 30th, but I think it got shifted to October 1st.
Right.
And then sometime in, hopefully October, it'll come
Too
before the
busy
full
in
board
September.
for consideration.
And do we know how many people proposed?
No, I don't. I actually have a meeting on Tuesday with our consultant, Terra
Oh,
Verde,
okay.
and then I'm gonna go
Yeah,
start
I
getting that
just Thought
information.
maybe you had it at the top of your head.
Director Snelly, you raised your hand.
Thank you, President Martin. Glenn, I kind of felt bad because we were probably a little tough on Chris when he was here earlier, and I know he's just trying to really be proactive around this shutdown. But what's the word from our peers in the water, in the county water authority as far as their efforts to communicate? Because honestly, other than Vallecitos, I know I've gone to the other websites, I've seen like the little, nobody goes to anybody's websites, right? Except for people in the water industry, but the average resident does not.
No.
So other than putting a little blurb on their websites, I have not seen anything else. All of the media has been listed from Vallecitos. I haven't seen the street signs that you guys have out, but somebody reached out to me and said that they saw it today. They didn't tell me what it said, and I know you're very limited as to what you can put on those, but does it talk about how these are voluntary requests, or because, how that message comes out can really scare people, and if they don't understand that, this is all complete. I've had people reach out to me like, well, what exactly do you want us to do? And so I would give them an example. I told them what I'm personally going to do. I'm going to shut my sprinklers off, and maybe about 3, 4, 5 days into it, I'll evaluate how my stuff is doing, and if it's doing okay, I'll leave them off. But if I absolutely have to, I'll run a cycle. and then I'll turn it back off again and see where we're at. But people hear these water restrictions and they hear level 1 and it sounds really scary, but in reality it's not. And so how do we get the message out there without scaring people?
I think just from the sign, stock up on plastic bottles.
So that's always the challenge. I mean, how do you get that message out there in an effective way that people are going to listen? You know, the vast majority of people aren't going to listen to the message anyway. But the people that do, what the sign says, and Ed can help me here, I think it says limit outdoor irrigation, words to that effect.
Yeah, restrict outdoor irrigation on the first page, and then the second page says Vallecitos customers September 9th through 18th. So it's just 2 quick pages flipping back and forth as far as what's being said, and you're right.
Why does it say Vallecitos customers? Anyone that sees it should do it.
No, because like Levenheim, they're not requiring restrictions, Escondido's not requiring restrictions. There's just a very few of us that are in this boat, because there are other agencies like VID, who's our neighbors directly to the north, they're not gonna have to have restrictions, because they have their own lake, their own treatment plant. We're one of the few that rely 100% on the water authority for our
Yeah,
water.
but we have our signs in our district.
Right.
There are people who drive through our district, oh well.
But when we get our groundwater desal, we'll have our own. So
Oh, jeez.
But
Yeah, have a nice dinner with Scott.
but we do have a direct connection to the desal plant, and I haven't seen anything about us kind of talking about how that should help us get through this type of situation, unless that's not the case, and if it's not the case, that's really disappointing.
No, we will have that connection online. We'll also have the first aqueduct, which was the reason for getting that valve replaced before the shutdown. And then we'll have water from a Levenheim treatment plant as well. So a good portion of our agency will have water coming in if everything goes as planned. But we're also aware that the desal plant tends to kick offline for one reason or other, where they've got to take it offline for regulatory reasons. We will not be able to get any water during this shutdown to our Twin Oaks reservoirs, so those are going to be plumb full. But once the shutdown begins, we can only take water out. We can't put water in up there. We're preparing for worst case scenario. If things don't go as planned, if this shutdown lasts longer than 10 days, then we're asking for conservation up front. It is voluntary, and in the message that Chris's department has put out, it's also saying basically what you said, do the best you can. We're not saying we're gonna go out and patrol, we're not gonna go shut off any meters, but it's best if we have this message out first, so if things do go south and we do wind up in a pinch, we've already alerted our customers, we've already had some conservation if we have to make a harder plea to our customers to conserve.
And I understand that it's really a dichotomy, watching the two different issues, and we're handling them 2 completely different ways. We're using an overabundance of caution here because we still are getting desal, we still are getting the pipe now from the other where, so we're still getting water. 20 years ago, when we were using the same amount of water as we are now, from what everybody tells me, we used to shut down for 10 days once a year.
But it was a complete shutdown of incoming water back then, and we did not have 120 million gallons capable in storage. We did not have the big reservoirs.
That's what I'm saying, we're in much better shape today than we were 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but those were maintenance shutdowns in the wintertime, low demand.
We've never done one of these shutdowns during the summer.
Yeah, we use about 3 times as much water on a typical day in the peak summer as we do in the winter. So it's a big difference.
So the amount of water we can bring in at those connection points, last month's average daily usage was over 18 million gallons per day. So we would wipe out our storage really quick if we didn't have the connections stay online. And that's what we're preparing for. We don't think there'll be a problem with the first aqueduct. That traditionally has been very secure once it's online. But the Water Authority is also going to be running their aqueduct system completely different than they ever have during this shutdown and for the period after that. So they're kind of pushing their system to limits. So we're not taking any chances. We're going to fill everything up, and we're going to ask our customers to conserve on the outset and hope for the best. But we're kind of the Boy Scouts when it comes to that. We plan for the worst. Be prepared.
What's your worst case scenario?
First aqueduct goes offline and the desal plant kicks offline, which would also then take away our Liebenheim water because the water authority would then pull the trigger on their contract with them to start pushing the water that we were buying into the aqueduct.
So in this day and age, we could have water trucks. Is that worst case scenario?
Well, we'd still have our 120 million gallons roughly of storage to work off.
We would just have to make sure no one used anything outdoors. So we would start, if things went south, we would start our 24-hour patrols. We'd be knocking on doors, asking them to shut off their sprinklers. If you remember in February of 2006, we called it the perfect storm. It was an aqueduct shutdown, but it was both the first and second aqueducts were off. And we had red flag conditions in February. It was 95 degrees with Santa Ana winds. There was fires burning in the county. We did not have Twin Oaks Reservoir number 2. We did not have Double Peak. We did not have the infrastructure to move water into Santa Leo Hills area yet from downtown. We were quite a bit less on our storage, and it was started on Super Bowl Sunday. In the first 8 hours of that shutdown, we lost 30% of our storage. And the shutdown only went 6.5 days, not full 10, before we got flow back at our Vallecitos 10 connection to Twin Oaks Reservoir number 1, and we were down to 33% in storage. We would not have made the 10 days. We would have had areas that would have gone dry. So having had that experience, yes, we have a lot more storage capability, but things go wrong. So we want to let our customers know up front to please conserve. If they can do the most pre-watering they can, that's in Chris's message, is to super soak their irrigation. That'll help tremendously, because then if they can lay off us for at least a few days at the beginning of that shutdown, that'll conserve quite a bit of water.
So at some point in time, let's say worst case scenario happened, would we be trucking in water and filling our tanks with it?
You couldn't truck enough water.
Well, not enough, but you truck more than not trucking anything.
No, you couldn't.
Wouldn't make it.
No.
It would not
So
make
we
a
would
dent.
just run out of water
Yep.
in the year 2019.
If everything went south, but we don't want to do that. And I don't think it would happen as long as our customers conserved. At that point, we would certainly send out a stronger message. We'd be on the news. In 2006, I had 3 different news stations interviewing me, because unfortunately I was in charge at the time. My boss was sick with pneumonia, so I got to be on camera. But yeah, I've been through it, and it's something that we were well prepared for back then with the storage we had. But the worst case scenario did hit us, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's the last, that's it, okay. County Water Authority, I assume we have no report.
Legal
Encino
counsel.
wastewater.
Legal.
Oh, I went right past you, I'm so sorry.
Well, that's all right. I don't have much to report. I would just say I was listening to a podcast today which might be of interest to Director Hernandez. The young man speaking on it was a second-year law student in New Zealand who was attending, he was a rugby fan, attending one of the major rugby events in New Zealand. 20,000 fans guzzling beer out of single-use plastic cups. And he started a company called Globalette to develop reusable plastic cups for sporting events. He figured, 3 New Zealanders drinking 3 beers per game out of single-use cups, you had all these cups. And so he started this cause, which has taken off. It takes me back to my days when we used to take the soda bottles back to the grocery store and get a
Heck,
nickel.
yes.
On this, you go to a sporting event, you pay $2 for extra for the beer that you get out of the cup. And when you bring the cup back, you get the $2 back, and they wash it, so.
I like it.
He thinks that he can end global consumption of single-use plastic waste in our lifetime.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Now I know why I saw Jim at Sears buying washing machines. All right. Okay, back to the Water Authority, nothing. Encino Wastewater Authority,
Capital Committee is going to have their meeting next week or 2.
yeah, what about the overall, the board meeting? No?
Let's see,
Nothing
what did we do?
I wasn't there.
Oh, you weren't? Then we didn't do much. without you.
Okay, well, thank you. Standing committees. We heard what policy did.
Yeah, and finance met on the, was it 28th, I think it was, and for the life of me, I can't recall.
Okay, what we met on. Glenn can fill us in. Wes can fill us in.
We discussed the reserve levels at June 30th.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah.
We also talked about smart metering and reclaimed water sales.
That's right.
And what I found most interesting was, when I first joined the board, was all this conversation about these new Pearl meters that were being installed. And it was the ductile of the meter world at the time. And then I never knew this, but we've been replacing them because they don't work.
Well,
Is that correct?
We had some faulty.
come up and use my card?
Yeah. I'd never heard that before.
It's not that they don't work, it's just that we received some faulty ones in our initial setup. So we have been getting replacements for those. So
We're getting replacements for those, but we're no longer installing those.
we have them all installed. All of our meters now are AMRs, and most of them are iPearls and Omnis.
Yeah. So
So when,
they're replacing them with the same ones, but ones that work.
yeah, they were warranty replacements. So when we went from manual reads to automated meter reads, the AMR meters, that contract was with Census. We started to get some faulty meters, so we had to go back to Census and say, hey, we expect these to work. So they gave us warranty replacements for the ones that were malfunctioning.
Was there a lawsuit involved?
From my understanding, there was, and we had a settlement to replace a certain number through that settlement.
But now we're looking at doing something else.
Well, we're looking into the possibility of AMI, which would be an automated read, so just sitting in a computer reading it instead of drive-by. Also smart metering, which would be the same thing, so you get real-time usage.
And the AMI, I understand, is we have volunteers that we're installing AMI, or is it the other one?
So this is for the smart metering. This is we're looking at capstone meters. We're actually doing and I think you're referring to Flume. The volunteers for Flume, that's a customer-based sort of meter reader type thing. So we put it on the meter, the customer has to connect it to their Wi-Fi, they get an app on their phone and they can see their real-time usage on their phone, but it's their personal application.
Right.
The other one we're looking at is called capstone meters. That's a smart meter. It has a web portal, so we have real-time usage on there. That's on our side. We're looking at doing a 25-meter pilot program for that.
Okay, and we're looking for volunteers to do that?
No volunteers on that. We've identified our worst areas to read, some larger meters and some just really hard-to-read areas through AMR, so we have to drive out far, maybe hard to read, so on and so forth. So we've identified 25 meters that we're going to be putting in. It's a no-cost, no-obligation pilot program to the district.
Okay, there's no cost to us, including installation.
Correct.
That's a freebie, that's great.
And if it ends up working and we do implement it district-wide, one of the great benefits is not only would there possibly be an opportunity to cut costs with having to pay people to drive around and actually take the reads for us, and not only the labor, but also the vehicles and the gasoline and the pollution and everything else.
Yeah.
But even what's really cool about it is that our customers would get basically either a phone app or a dashboard for their computer, and they'd be able to look at their water usage live and either make adjustments or identify leaks in their system or whatever it might be from the comfort of their own home.
So the return on investment would be huge. If we start investing them, it could be, if they work.
And depending on the cost.
Is that a question you had, Mr. Hernandez? see
No,
you
I
had
was
one.
raising my hand for meter leaks.
Okay. And other standing committee, engineering?
Nothing, didn't have a meeting this month. Next month, 1st of October.
Okay, report on travel, conferences, seminars. Let's start with you, Mr. Hernandez.
We had our conference in San Diego, which, we actually had a couple of them. We drove down with the manager to San Diego, which saved us a little time and money.
Urban Water.
Urban Water
Water.
Institute.
Right. Interesting, reclaimed water still up at the top of the list. And then the second one was CASA
CASA, yep.
in Mission Bay. That was an interesting one because that was one where it was only a 3-day conference, and so I drove down too because I didn't want to drive down just for a reception. So I got up very early the first day and drove down, got there, and so that, I think our new policy will benefit us on that.
Director Sinella,
Nothing to report.
Director Lotharp.
Yeah, I attended the CASA conference as well. That first day, Wednesday, I attended the CASA Board of Directors meeting. Being a board member of that body, I attended. And then the next 2 days, there was some good speakers. One was on a motivational speaker on building a high-performing culture. And if it had been a half hour instead of an hour, I would have been a lot more motivated. My motivation left me after about a minute. But there was another one on creating new water, which focused on some real-world examples of essentially recharging groundwater with reclaimed water. Some examples up in Orange County as well as the Central Valley area. There was a session on crisis communications, which Director Martin alluded to previously. And then one on impacts of climate change to the bottom line of your organization, which was interesting. And the closing day was Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. He had interesting perspective on legislative issues, regulatory issues. That's all.
I also attended both, and I thought Joaquin was great. It's nice to see someone who is a politician, who really you could actually believe in. As much as he says he's not a politician, he is a politician, but that you can believe in. And yes, I attended the course on crisis management. You can see that one over like a lead balloon tonight. We'll be the last ones to get our message out, but that's all right. That'll give us a good chance to see if they told me correctly or not. Other than that, I'm done. Director's comments, future agenda items?
Nothing here.
Nothing. Adjourned. Thank you very much, one and all.